Executive Committee meeting this morning, January 11th. Good morning, everybody. Commissioner Janet Long is en route. It'll be several minutes before she gets here from Clearwater, so we'll go ahead and get started without her. Any public comment? Seeing none. If you would take a quick look at the agenda and we have approval of the agenda. Okay, agenda looks good. All right, we'll move on to action items. And please review the December 7th, 2015 minutes.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I had one item that I wanted to note on page 3 under other business. We talked about summer youth free fares to meal sites. I think that was also to address the request of the summer free bus passes. So that would make that as a modification.
Okay.
No,
Rachel, did you capture that?
Yeah.
And with that, I would move approval of minutes as drafted.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, minutes accepted. The next discussion is regarding our board rules and regulations and some changes. And you'll see in our backup materials and the printed material in front of you some of the suggested edits and changes for specifically the open comment section of the meeting. Brad, you want to?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. On page 4, there's sort of a rundown of 5 different changes. I think we have talked about these at the executive committee level for the last couple of months and sort of compiled them all in this one resolution. Number 1 is a change to require public comment at the board meeting to be related to PSTA. Sometimes this has been an issue, but if someone wants to talk about, I don't know, Donald Trump or something else, or that's not, the chair can say it has to be related to PSTA. Number 2 is, and this is something that Chair Johnson was doing the last couple of months, but is now would be added to our rules and regulations that would require board member comments be directed to the chair or to the CEO, not as to try to discourage a give and take with the person at the podium. It's a time for the public to speak to the board, not necessarily a back and forth. Number 3, it kind of goes and just provides some clarity to the different ways in which votes can be taken at the board. Number 4 is a clarification. There's really no change to what we've been doing, but just clarifies that the personnel committee is made up of the chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, plus 2 additional board members, which is how it has been. And the last one is just finding that Robert's Rules of Order is what we follow, which is something that the executive committee has been talking, as recommended. So, Alan, you want to say anything else?
No, I mean, the one on the committees, when we changed the makeup of the board, of the executive committee, we didn't correspondingly change the makeup of the personnel committee, which was made up originally the executive committee plus 2, since we added 2 people to the executive committee.
Questions, comments?
I have a question. It talks about there's a tie. If there's a tie vote, it will be scheduled for the next meeting. Now, usually, if there's a tie, the motion fails. And that's is Robert's rules saying something different, Alan? the staffing of 4 of the board rules and regulations.
Okay, so that's the existing language. I don't remember the history. That we're not proposing to change that. I mean, that's really.
I'm suggesting that maybe we can.
Chair,
Yes.
hey, we have that similar language in Clearwater with the idea that with an odd number of board members, we should not have a tie vote unless somebody is absent. And I think the strategy there was that if there is a tie vote, we can be deferred till the next meeting when the full board will be there.
That makes sense.
Not that, but the mayor is correct that you cannot pass a motion on a tie vote.
I get it. I get it. That makes some sense. The other question in that same paragraph, it says the chairperson may not make a motion or second any motion. Again, I think in Robert's rules, you can hand someone else your gavel and pass on. If you want to second a motion, you can go to your vice chair and let the vice chair run the meeting, and you can then make a second or make a motion. So I don't know.
I think in that case, if you're relinquishing the gavel, then the
You're not
vice chair
considered-
becomes the chair.
Right.
Not chair in title.
No,
but-
for that,
Yeah.
yes, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So I'm just curious. Are you saying that that's not the ability?
Again, we're not proposing, that's not a
I
proposed
know.
change, but I understand what you're saying. Maybe we should make that a small seat. In other words, it's the person who's chairing the meeting can't make a motion. So if it's the chairperson that's chairing the meeting, or the vice chair is chairing the meeting because the gavel's been passed or because the chairperson's absent.
I mean, you just might want to make that a clarification because we seem to get
I mean, I don't think it's-
micromanaged with our rules, and I don't want that to be a misunderstanding in the future.
I don't think it's ever
You know, the
come
chair
up.
should,
But-
the chair should have that opportunity to do that.
But maybe we should just make that a small chair, just a small seat. That,
That sounds like a good suggestion for me. Just to make the motion.
Just under discussion, in your city councils, do you use that practice?
I have, and our previous mayors have. Actually, no, I have not actually done it. Our previous mayors have done it. I mean, it doesn't happen very often.
I've seen it happen in smaller boards, not with 15 board members, it's usually you're able to get a motion in a second. But I've seen it happen in 5-member boards.
Yeah.
I know that's typical in a legislative session where the chair of the committee will be sponsoring the committee's bill to the vice chair and everything. I don't think in Clearwater we have ever done that, which is the reason I asked the question.
And I know since the St. Pete culture is typically the year that someone's the chairperson, they're not typically putting forth a lot of their own project ideas or new business items. But sometimes there's leftover work from the year that carries over, and when that comes back on the agenda, the chairperson will usually hand it over to the vice chair to work through.
So if you're looking for a motion to change the capital chairperson to a small chairperson, I would make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I have a question about the, under E4, the fourth sentence, it says, basically, each person who addresses the board is limited to 3 minutes unless the board grants additional time. And I have a question about the unless the board grants additional time in terms of, if someone were to go over their time and be allowed to keep speaking like for 4 minutes, then would that constitute some, for other speakers that they cut off at 3 minutes, would they have a legitimate reason to complain for unfair process? Are we on the same materials?
page 7.
And I thought of that. I know we did have an incident in St. Petersburg where a speaker was allowed to go on for over 3 minutes, and yet someone else had been cut off, and the person who was cut off actually tried to sue the city for the unfair discretion that was exercised. So I just want to know what you think about that.
You know, that's a holdover from before we had the process where you could get up to actually 10 minutes. I want to delete that. Because we didn't always have that process where if you were speaking on behalf of other people, you could get them to sign up and then you sign away your time, and you could get 10 minutes.
I don't think that was her question. Her question is, what if somebody just runs over and the chair doesn't cut them off? So,
No, I think.
Right, but the original language probably refers to how we allow people to bunch up time, but the
Yeah.
language is already in here that allows me to do that, so we could just strike the phrase.
Right, since we have a process that allows people to get up to 10 minutes.
So what are you striking?
Okay, do I hear a motion to support striking the
Period after
phrase?
minutes.
I would move to strike the unless the board grants additional time for the first paragraph on page 4.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
If I may, in that same paragraph, one thing that the city of Clearwater does is they allow a group, but the second, third, fourth person is not allowed to add an additional 3 minutes. It rather it adds 1 minute per each additional speaker, up to a total of 10 minutes. And I just provide that as an alternative method to, I mean, you still require their signature.
No, I think it's great to hear ideas from how different commissions and cities do it. I think there's a lot of diversity there to learn from. I guess my question is, sometimes when I notice that people tend to do that, it's because they have like a presentation, and
Right.
so chopping it up every minute between different speakers might interrupt someone who just wants to bring, a 7 or 8 minute PowerPoint presentation.
In way Clearwater does, we don't.
Oh, it's
That
the
time
cards.
is given
Got
to
it.
the speaker,
Got
so
it.
the speaker can make a 10-minute presentation. But rather than just having one additional person for a 6-minute speech,
Mhm.
you would have 3 and then 3 other people.
In other words, and that's the way they do it in Marco. Each additional person gets you 1 minute instead of 3 minutes. So if you want to get to 10 minutes, it takes, 7 people?
Yes.
We often have this like 2 or 3.
yeah, how about reduce it? I said, it really hasn't given
Excuse me.
We often have a group of 2 or 3 get do 10 minutes. Do
Well, I've frequently seen 2 people
Yeah.
that are there on several hours.
Excuse me. Hello.
I apologize. I'm very sorry.
We're on the discussion of the PSTA board rules and regulations.
Do we feel like there's a
I'm
need to
agnostic
change?
about it. I don't want to necessarily make it more difficult for people.
That seems like it would be.
What was the recommendation, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure, we're discussing E4, where a spokesperson for a group may address the board for 3 minutes, but they can also borrow time from other speakers up to 10 minutes. So Commissioner Johnson was sharing that Clearwater has a practice where when they kind of bundle speakers to add up time, the extra person is 1 minute, not 3 minutes. So it would require a group to bring more people to the meeting. 7 people instead of, it'd be 3 times 3 is 9.
Well, my only comment, if we're in the comment phase, Madam Chair, is that I think how many does not matter to me as much as the total length of time, because you could have a very controversial issue in front of us, and you could have, I'm just making it up, a couple hundred people. So there should be a maximum, I think. And then if there are more, then the next person can get up and speak another 10 minutes. Do you know what I mean? But for one person to stand there and talk for more than 10 minutes, you can say an awful lot in 10 minutes.
We're not changing the 10-minute limit, but rather just
The way you achieve it.
Is there a problem with the way we do it now?
we've had several instances where 2 people have spoken on multiple agenda items during the meeting. And sometimes they don't take 10 minutes, or they don't take 6 minutes, which would be a lot. I'm just sharing that this is the way we do it. Does the county have a group speakers?
Yes, and if there's a group and they all want to talk on the same subject, same in the legislature, in the committee structure. If you have many people, they all want to get up and say the same thing, they'll elect one amongst themselves, one person to come up and speak. And then most people, after they've heard the issue addressed, will waive coming up because they recognize, how many times can you say the same thing?
I'm not making a motion to change it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sensing there's a lot of loyalty, but thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really worthwhile to hear how other cities do things. We learn a lot from each other. Any other comments and changes?
I would move to recommend for the changes as amended.
Can we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
I do have another question regarding rules, and that's, Mr. Miller and I were talking, where do we find the rules or our board policy on things like the UPACs? That I would think we should be able to find that on the website someplace. And I think Brad said that he was considering consolidating that, like we have another policy on sustainability that we should be able to find it on the website. So it's just
Yes, I mean, we have those, we have a book of policies like that, the board has adopted, and I think it's a great idea to put that on the website. UPass, sustainability,
maybe purchase a piece of commodity purchasing.
yeah, although I think that's actually in the rules and regulations. The diesel.
Yes, purchases in the purchasing section. Yeah, we put that in the procurement section of rules and regulations.
That's a great idea.
Okay, moving on to our January board meeting agenda, which is the last page of the backup materials.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, in your packet is a draft of the agenda for the 27th here, and I think it's important to walk through this a little bit and have Alan sort of walk us through the beginning of the meeting in light of having a plan to have a revote or a reconsideration of the chair of the officers of PSTA. Want to go?
Sure. So the procedure, I think that best works given the situation we're in, and we do have agreed to a stay of the litigation with Mr. Rass pending the completion of the reconsideration of the vote for the board officers, is to start off the meeting with the reconsideration, which will require the board to actually take a motion to vote to reconsider the vote on the board officers that took place at December 9th. Now, we're only talking about the 3 officer positions, not the committee positions, since that's not the subject of the alleged sunshine law violation. Assuming the board adopts that motion at that point, Chair Rice will pass the gavel to Chair Johnson, because as soon as that occurs, then Chair Johnson is actually, under board rules, still the chair of the board. So Bill will then chair the meeting. What we will do is we will ask Councilmember Rice and Councilmember Johnson to state their substance of their conversation so that we can cure the alleged sunshine law violation. The board will be asked to have a full and complete discussion of the voting on the board officers. The nominating committee has already met. They had a full and complete new discussion on their recommendations and nominations for the 3 board officers, so that will be presented to the board, and then the board will have their discussion and will vote. I will advise the board that they should act as if the December 9th meeting did not occur with regard to the nomination and election of the board officers. So Bill will take nominations from the floor again. Any board member can nominate, any single board member can nominate anybody, any other board member for any one of the 3 board officer positions, and then you will take votes as you did last time. And whoever is elected board chair can either assume the chair position at that time, or if you would, or if the board would prefer, you could have it start at the next meeting, February 1st, or whenever you would want that position, or those 3 officer positions to come out.
Would that be a game time decision, or can we make that decision now just to kind of, for clarity, just whoever is elected to go ahead and run the meeting?
Well, it's really up for the entire board to do. You can make a recommendation. What we're suggesting is that, I think the suggestion is that you go ahead and sit in the chair seat. Mr. Johnson will be sitting in the seat next to Brad, and you can just pass the gavel. And then if you want, I guess you can just pass it back if you're elected chair, or if Julie's elected chair, we can just have the person run the meeting from wherever they're seated.
Any questions?
So the motion is, somebody needs to make the motion to reconsideration.
Somebody in the majority will need to make the motion to reconsider. So in the case of the chair, there was 7 to 6, I believe, so one of the 7 will need to make the motion to reconsider, and the other 2 board officer positions was unanimous, I believe, so it would be anybody who was present at the meeting. The second can be by anybody, it does not need to be somebody who's in the majority. Only the motion itself.
Would you repeat the first part of what you said?
So the motion to reconsider the chair position will need to be made by one of the 7 who voted the majority.
One of the 7 that was on, one of the nominating committee, or just on the board?
One of the 7 on the board. The vote was 7 to 6. There was 13 board members there last time. The vote was 7 to 6. So one of those 7 who voted for Councilmember Rice to be chair will need to make the motion to reconsider. The second can be by any board member. Okay.
Thank you.
So we could do it one of 2 ways. You could make a motion to reconsider all 3 at once. That motion, again, would have to be made by one of the 7 who voted EA on the chair position, and instead of taking 3 motions. that.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find it.
I
Should be
believe,
in minutes.
I recall the 7, but
It was a show of hands, I
It was a
believe,
show of
so
hands.
that's
Yes, I
easy
was asking
to
the question.
recapture.
Yeah.
It's not in fact.
but okay, we should have that in minutes.
So when Chair Rice convenes a meeting, she will announce the process for the reconsideration, whether you want to turn it over to Mr. Zimmern or not, but then you will ask for a motion. Then if that motion is adopted, then I guess I get the gavel.
Right, because at that point, it's like the action on December 9th never happened, so under the rules, you continue to serve until your replacement is elected.
So then, I would serve down to the action item, or would we do the action item on the board officers immediately following the, I think, disposition of the chairmanship?
We had put the vote on the board officers right after the reconsideration.
Okay, that's not the way it is here.
My copy shows that. 3A, 3B.
So 3D.
Be a motion to reconsider.
The election of the board officers.
Okay,
And then-
I must have printed this prior to,
And then we have election.
I got it. Okay.
Any other questions? Is this pretty clear? I would like to thank Alan for the time that you put into doing the research and making sure that, just in an abundance of caution, that we're doing everything that we need to do to write this and to get started on a good foot for 2016, because there's a lot of exciting things that PSTA is working on, and I appreciate your professionalism and diligence that we're taking all the right steps to gain full confidence in the process.
Thank you.
Once we get past that, the agenda's got some significant items on it. Most principally is a presentation, if you look at the back page. First, on updating our legislative priorities. The PSTA board adopted legislative priorities back in August at the state and federal level, and we're not actually recommending any changes to the priorities, but we've had some great success, as was mentioned. So at the legislative committee meeting last week, the legislative committee suggested, the way we message this is that we're recommending an update, essentially to take off the list the Central Avenue BRT, because now that it was funded by FDOT. And on the federal side, the Congress passed a new transportation bill, so that comes off the list. So that's the first item there. And Ben Diamond is our new legislative committee chair, so he'll give that report. The second item on the list is the revised CEO performance evaluation that the Personnel Committee meeting back in early December met and discussed. But at the board's direction, I developed a revised, easier performance evaluation sheet, modeled exactly after one that is being used by the Pinellas counties, Mark Woodard. And so that would be the next item, to approve that form to then be distributed to the board.
And that was presented in draft format in December for questions. We did not have any questions or comments. And
That's right. That's right.
This is the market that we take action.
That's right. And third is sort of the big item that's going to be presented to both our committees this Friday. Finance and the Planning Committee, which is the Strategic Communication Plan, which Cindy Raskin-Schmidt, our Director of Communication, is going to be presenting. It talks about how we are going to be doing a lot of market research and hiring a consultant that we are soon to be out on the street with procurement for. That will be coming back to you. But that's got to be all.
If I recall, I see that is going to be on Friday's Finance Committee agenda. It's on the Planning Committee agenda as well. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Then under informational items, we wanted to just give an update about Central Avenue BRT. That should be relatively brief. Just talking about that this spring is going to be marked with public engagement on that project. We're setting up some systems to make sure we get a diverse amount of public engagement, because that'll be very important, as you know, to the federal government to demonstrate that we've gotten strong support for the project. And then the 7B PSTA MPO joint workshop, the idea that we would have there, again, we're having a joint workshop here at PSTA on the 22nd. But the idea would maybe be to have the chairperson sort of lead that. It's a relatively brief item, just to remind the board members that we're having the joint meeting and to get any input. Basically open it up for comment and input from the board about what they would like to see coming out of that meeting. We'll have a draft agenda so that Sandra will walk through with the committee, or maybe Whit.
This committee meeting will talk about upcoming, but this meeting is
What?
the board agenda, so the meeting will be done.
Oh, that's right. This is a follow-up. Sorry, I got confused. Well, I just said it was going to happen on Friday.
Yes, on Friday it will be.
That's right.
Committee.
At this meeting, we will have already had the joint MPO workshop, so the chair would maybe ask for any follow-up or feedback from the meeting.
Got it. So maybe we need to add the word feedback after the word workshop.
Or
That's a good point.
report.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's post report.
Good point.
Which one? Post report.
7B.
That concludes my remarks. Is there if there's any other questions?
So I take it we're going to see a proposed draft agenda for the joint workshop at our committee meetings?
Yes. We've also invited Whit Blanton to come to at least the planning committee.
Great.
To talk about it.
Terrific.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Because I have a conflict with most of the meetings on Friday, I wanted to mention on the strategic communications plan that just my initiative, and I don't know that we want to talk into the response, but just go on record so it's up. Because I'll have to leave at 9:30, I'll be here for part of the finance committee, but I would hope that we could talk about the communications plan during that first half hour. The concern I have is that the presentation in the package seemed to be more about PSTA rather than about engaging the community and what is their desire in from us. And then the second thing I would mention is on the PSTA MPO joint workshop. I would hope we would get into a fairly strategic discussion about the relationship that might include land use planning and how PSTA relates to some of the things that the PPC and the MPO are doing, and rather than just the superficial initial discussions of, say, using the funds for the PSTP funds. So that, again, because I won't be here for much of that discussion.
Did you want to address that, Mayor?
Yeah, and I can just say to you that I did speak a little bit about this at great length
discussion on how both organizations does their goal setting. That it's not a separate process, that it's something in the future that we're doing together. So, if MPO is, and I'll use 19 as an example because it's an ongoing thing, but if 19 is in their 5-year goal to accomplish, let's say, then that needs to be one of our priorities as well, because there's going to be transit elements on 19, and how does that fit in? There'll be a crossover for a little while because they've already got some of their priorities, and so do we. But in the future, that we have to, as we're making the next 5 years or whatever, that we're doing that as a joint organization.
Good.
I mean, it just has to be that way, or we all have to be going down the same road, and we all have to agree. And if you get buy-in from both organizations, that that's the direction, and you get comfortable. So that was a discussion we had.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Well, I just wanted to reference two things. First of all, to Commissioner Johnson's point about the BRT communication plan, or the strategic communication plan. What he said somewhat confuses me, because I thought that the BRT Central Avenue line that we have fought so hard for the last 2 years was based on a strategic assessment and defined need. Is that not correct?
That's correct. And this is for overall for PSTA.
Right. So then but to his point, I would think that the communication plan was more to educate the consumers about the plan and why it's so critical to our big picture in South County, and not so much about what I thought I heard him say, what they wanted. Because what they want and what we can provide, I don't know how that, I'm assuming that we came up with that whole plan because that's what they wanted. Am I misunderstanding?
I think so.
If I can just add, I think under number 8, stakeholder engagement, I think that there might be some, I see Cindy's here in the room. I think that there could be a way that we could accommodate what you're talking. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the, I went to the sneak preview of the communications presentation that was distributed in the finance committee. I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Johnson. To me, I think there's like some nuances, and it's a difference between marketing is when PSTA is sort of like a one-way communications direction, telling the world what we're doing. PR and public relations is that process of listening and then showing the public how we've taken their feedback and incorporated it into our plan. So I think we're off to a really great start with this, and I think you've identified a good area that we could certainly strengthen. So Cindy, I see you're listening here attentively. Is there some way that we could maybe under number 8, stakeholder engagement, maybe more clearly address the concerns that Chairman Johnson brought out? Okay. That's a good way to go
Yes,
forward.
it is, and thank you for that clarification. And then my second point was on the comments that Mayor Wojcicki just made, because one of the things that I have become astutely aware of is that in our, I'm just going to use the word region, there are 9 governmental agencies working on transportation issues, and how do we solve this problem. And one of the ones that seems to me to be a no-brainer is that while we're talking about the goal setting that you just spoke about, I think we also need to be mindful of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, which also has defined transportation as its number 1 goal in this coming year, and maybe find ways to even be more collaborative.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about regional, that is our regional planning agency.
No doubt.
So.
We can certainly invite them even to the meeting.
Two of us already.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
We're
we're
on
both on
the
the.
board, so that's why I'm speaking to it, because I think I've shared before, we have a brand-new executive director that, and today is his first day.
Yeah.
So he'll be making the rounds and introducing himself to everyone, and I look for that to be a transformational opportunity, not only for us, but for the MPO, the BBC, and all the other entities. So it's exciting.
I think Councilwoman Rice will agree with me that, some of the folks that are on PMPO, they've just sort of been trained along the way to remain in their own box, if you will. I'm trying to say that as politely as possible.
You did it very well.
Because I'm not trying to slam anybody, it's just the way it was operated.
Yeah.
And if we want to get into a new thing, they're very protective over that road project that they've got. Well, at some point, and it might take a while of a transition, at some point, that road project has to be a complete road project. It has to be the road, the sidewalk, the bike path, and the transit that's on top of it, and the land use, and it's all got to go together.
Yeah.
And so we all have to be thinking about the complete street, rather than how am I going to reconstruct this road and add a lane to it.
And to that point, at our last joint meeting with MPO, and we presented the three main strategic drivers of focusing on 19 as the backbone of the community, enhancing access to the beaches, and then focusing on the economic engine of the gateway area. And PSTA just jumped out as a major stakeholder and partner, critical to the success of all three of those projects. And I think that's where the door has been opened for us to have those, strategic conversations that Chairman Johnson just mentioned a few minutes ago. It gives us that entree to have that discussion without just kind of zeroing in for the STP discussion.
Yeah. Right.
And we may not finish that discussion at that workshop, because we can create the parameters for that discussion.
Yeah, I know Cassandra and Whit have been working very well on exactly what Mayor Puchalski said, or those discussions that you said you had with Whit. I know we've had a lot of discussions about how this workshop can be positioned so it comes out that we're working together. Clearly have different roles to play in the transportation discussion, but we want to make sure that no one is working inside a confined box, as Mayor said, and understands what the needs are for the services we already have, as well as the new services. So that's why we thought it's best to have Whit come to the planning committee meeting on Friday and speak directly to us about, because we're working really well with him, and I know he has the best intentions, but he's very, very important to leading, as you say, kind of a new spirit at the MPO of looking at this in a much more holistic way. So look forward to his discussion on Friday.
Other items on the agenda?
We're trying to be generally more conservative with the time expectation. Looking at this meeting to adjourn a little bit after the noon hour. If it finishes before the noon hour, that's just awesome. But trying to respond to concern.
At some point, Brad, and I don't know how others in the committee feel about this, but I would like to also get a sense of what some upcoming agenda items are to see things a little bit more in advance. I know it's going to change, and we don't have to get to a real granular level on what future agendas are, but just to have a general idea of some other things that we'll be looking at in terms of budget reports, service change reports, finance, just so that we can kind of get an idea of the flow of work and discussions through the year.
Yeah.
We all know it changes, but just kind of gives us an idea of what's on the horizon.
That's a great idea, Chair, and I also hope, Brad, that when the staff is putting together the report for Ben on the legislative priorities, that maybe we can give the entire board the time frame for all of the activities that are going to take place between now and the end of March, because it's between the state and the federal efforts that we have ongoing. It's going to be pretty, oh my God.
I know. Yes, no, that's definitely part of it. You know, as Mr. Diamond, as you know him, he's a strong proponent of lots of meat on the bones, as he says. So
Well,
the
that's
agenda
how you-
package will be about 25 pages.
Seriously?
Uh,
Well, that's a lot of meat.
Yeah, well, I mean, our government affairs folks, both in DC and Tallahassee, are working much better for us in helping produce that meeting. So, yeah.
Well, you said 25 pages.
I don't know, that
There
might
were-
be exact.
There were 4 pages to the legislative federal agenda, I think, that were included in the draft from our lobbyist, which I think he addressed and said this is good.
Yeah, yeah, okay, so, was it just 4? Okay, 4 from the Fed, so about 4, maybe 10 pages. 10 pages.
And I'm sure Commissioner Diamond's on this, but what would be great to have as a resource is just a real quick one-pager of bullet points, sums up the FAST Act, so we can kind of get a sense of
Yeah.
what happened.
We have a PowerPoint of that, which is not too many slides.
Chairman, if I could go back to the comment that you made, I think you were making that as part of the regular executive committee agenda would be the looking at the future things coming up. And that's sort of tied to the personnel review and the upcoming agenda items that are on that. So I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Constantly keep what are our objectives for the rest of the year.
Well, that mirrors the way we outline for an entire year the agenda items for the county commission, so that we all know if there was a really big idea floating around or subject matter that we're going to be talking about, it's on the projected list. Of course, there's always new things that come on there that we don't yet know about. But there are a lot of things that you're going to have to address this year.
Oh, yeah, right.
So for those, they should
Yeah.
all be on our projected, timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. We do have a future meeting subjects, part of every agenda at the end, but maybe a 12-month longer range. Well, that's not that long range, but a 12-month calendar, and that can really help guide our.
And the categories can correlate to the path forward, so we have a sense of keeping track of how we're moving forward on all
Yeah.
cylinders.
It's a great idea.
Can you add in there also that new timeline that we got from the feds when we were talking to them? 'Cause I don't believe we've seen an update to know how we translated that into a new.
On the BRT? Yeah.
Yeah, because there was a fabulous one-page, very colorful, beautifully done graphic of, here's the timeline. Do you remember that?
Yes, and
And
FDA
we found out
changed
that
it.
some of them were the cart before the horse. And we needed to switch that out. I don't believe I've seen an update on that page.
We saw an update in the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've seen an update in a new handout.
That might be good for Harry and Steve to have, though.
Oh, yeah, we've gone round and around with FDA since that meeting and have a completely revised version. We have a trip to planned in early February, yet another trip, to FTA's regional office in Atlanta, whose the DOT has sub-regions, and we're in the Atlanta region, and so we'll be updating that sheet with the new, I can't say FTA's approved it. I don't think they refused to approve it.
They did?
They don't want to commit themselves to approving anything that they might want to change their mind on, but they've looked at it.
But if they put it in writing, a suggestion that we can.
Yes.
Well, that is a section of our letter that we submit to enterprise project development. And so what we do is we have a draft that we take up to FTA. And so the calendar that you saw in the last presentation, which has some repeat in what Heather presents to the committees and to the board, that's what we'll take up. We have developed that in concert with Harry and Sue Palmer and Troy. So we discussed that calendar with them. And so we anticipate that when we go up on February 4, that calendar will be acceptable to put into our letter as part of everything else that we're submitting to the FDA. So yes, and confidently yes.
Very true.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Well, I would like to know what is this PSTA performance report update that Brad's going to do on 8A?
That's our standard report on ridership and procurements. That's on the agenda every month.
Oh, so that doesn't go back up here to this performance evaluation up here?
No,
Two
that
different things.
up top is my review form, just approving of the form. The 8A, the 7A is the standard ridership.
So when is that form?
8A.
When is that form, evaluation form, right? When does that due back? To be completed?
Based on the comments we received before, we're planning on issuing that, working with the chair and the chair's administrative staff to distribute that sometime in late February, and it would be due in early March. Probably have less of a window than we did last go round. Then have a personnel committee meeting in early to mid-March, because it's due at that'll be an item on the March board meeting, the March board meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, comments, discussions, thank you very much for your time. We'll adjourn our meeting.
Or first round.
It sounds like